Zero, this is I think something more along your wheelhouse, but I'll just give the minor details and you can go move forward from there. The new Star Ocean, the Divine Force, is coming out this week. And if you didn't know that, there's probably a good reason. It's because no one's advertising it. No one's talking about it. And this doesn't bode well for the company Tri-Ace, who develops the Star Ocean games and have been developing them since 1996 with the original Star Ocean and the Super NES. So, Zero, why don't you go ahead and talk about what's going on with Tri-Ace and the new release of the Divine Force. So go right ahead.
So pretty much just there was an interesting article that I'd stumbled on a while ago. Just credit goes to rpgsite.net, and I'm sure we can probably drop this link into the show notes and everything. But as of this year, just apparently Tri-Ace has announced that they'll be expecting a huge monetary loss for their company and decreased earnings as of the June 2022 fiscal year. One of the scariest parts of this is that the article that was produced by a Japanese gaming news site called GameBiz had said that basically the company's probably going to have to declare a state of insolvency. So, which that's not great as it is, but apparently just they've been producing this new Star Ocean with no income throughout the following year. So just essentially what that speaks to me is it just sounds like that while making this game, they're just constantly bleeding money just trying to make the game.
Right.
And in addition to that, it just sounds like that the Divine Force is literally their last hurrah. That if this thing isn't in some way a miraculous commercial sales success, then we can probably expect just Tri-Ace to probably declare insolvency and likely negotiate with Square Enix to say, yeah, we can't keep the studio going, so either you need to buy us out and just absorb us, or just buy the IPs and just help us basically kind of close our company out. So, which is a bit sad to see because I know a lot of Tri-Ace's games have not been real big successes. In some cases, they've been sort of cult hits.
Yeah.
So stuff like the original Valkyrie Profile or the PSP reissue of it, Valkyrie Profile Lenneth, probably one of my most favorite of the Tri-Ace games out there. I know the second big game for most people is a Star Ocean Second Story, or the PSP remake that came out. And the sad part is the remakes, both Valkyrie Profile Lenneth and Ocean First Departure R, they weren't actually made with Tri-Ace being involved in them. These were remakes that were done in-house with Square Enix's studio talent. So with these two games, just Square Enix has a bare mention saying original version was developed by Tri-Ace in the copyright section. So, and for anyone who needs a reminder for what major games that Tri-Ace last worked on, they would be the remaster versions of Resonance of Fate and Star Ocean: The Last Hope.
Yeah.
And Star Ocean: The Last Hope didn't really do too great. It's sitting around a score of 72, with OpenCritic reporting that only 25% of critics would recommend the game to everyone.
Yeah.
And then
Go ahead. Sorry.
Resonance of Fate, I believe, has a very similar sort of issue with them going on, just kind of sitting somewhere around the 60 to 70% mark. And that one was just kind of a graphical remaster. Just there wasn't any sort of fine tuning of the systems, because Resonance of Fate, while it's an interesting game, there are just so many systems, and it's real hard game to get into. I think when I last played it on the original release, that is on PS3, it took me maybe 2 or 3 days before I fully understood the battle system. and I was doing like kill combos and stuff like that, and doing massive armor break damage to enemies. And when I got the system down, it was just kind of like, holy cow, this feels really good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was looking at how much time I had to invest over it. I was just like, I had to play this game over three days before just I was able to put the pieces together. Holy crap, this game needs a little bit more streamlining, because what they've got here is awesome, but there could be something like a better tutorial, just maybe an optimized system, just something to streamline this down. And of course, with this 4K HD edition that was released on PS4 and PC, yeah, just Tri-Ace did nothing to improve the game. It was just, hey, here you go, guys, 4K graphics and HD graphics for anyone who's still stuck in the 1080p era. So here you go, have fun.
Yeah. So Tri-Ace, what it seems like is when they started, they were kind of a critical darling. They made great games that didn't really sell very well, but got enough of a fan base that people would recommend their RPGs and games. Even though they don't make much money, some studios and some console makers would look at someone like that and go, that's someone worth partnering with, because if they make quality games, whether they sell well or not, if everyone agrees they're quality, it'll make us look like we're quality in return. So that's not a bad deal for a company like Tri-Ace that does these types of games, but doesn't very much sell well. I guess the issue is that quality has dipped like precipitously in the past 10 years, 15 years. Like, I'm looking at their games right now, and Radiata Stories is something I remember from PS2 that I actually liked. But after that, Valkyrie Profile 2 I wasn't a fan of. I hated Infinite Discovery. The DS Valkyrie Profile, I'm going to look at all of them. Final Fantasy 13, 2, and 3, I mean, they did those. I forgot they did those.
Yeah, they were subcontractors for those games, so not 100% involved into them, but they were sort of like a support studio, if I remember correctly.
And I guess they were a support studio for Phantasy Star Nova as well. Yeah, and Exist Archive, I remember. It was a Spike Chunsoft game, but I remember that getting okay reviews. They kind of lost their way to a certain extent. Like, if you're going to be that type of studio that doesn't make much sales, the only thing you can do then is have the gravitas and the reputation of being a quality game maker, where someone will come up with you with a good amount of money and go, make a game for us. Here's the money. We don't care how much it sells. We just want to look good. And that's like the only other option you have. And it just looks like that Tri-Ace has just not been doing that. Like, they've had their remakes. They remade, you said, Star Ocean: The Last Hope and Resonance of Fate. But even them, they're not selling very well. So what other options do they have? Was there a figure in the article that you wrote that said for them to be solvent again, how much sales they would have to make for the new game?
Unfortunately, the translation from RPG site doesn't really have any sort of indicator on how much they would have to make in order to be a solvent company again. As far as the numbers go, this is what they had translated. And I quote, "The article reveals that Tri-Ace's sales during the whole year of 2022 had dropped by 42.9%. From 2 billion to 1.25 billion yen. So that 1.25 billion yen figure is roughly about 8.7 million. While the company had an operating profit of 240 million yen, equivalent to 1.7 million in the June 2021 fiscal year, that turned into a huge loss of 625 million yen. So they lost about 4.34 million US dollars in that time period. And then the translation continues with, likewise, their final profit went from 171 million yen to a deficit of 684 million yen.
Jesus.
So that number became 4.75 million US dollars in deficit. So yeah, it's just not looking good for them.
Yeah. You're looking at probably, and this is just a guess, you're probably looking at something that will have to sell along the lines of a Final Fantasy to help buoy that company and to get more, I guess, more work to that extent. And I doubt that will ever happen. So what are we looking at here with Tri-Ace? Does this mean that this might be their last game?
From the financials, it definitely looks like it. The only way that I could see them being saved is either A, they nail the sales numbers with Divine Force, and Divine Force ends up being just absolutely beloved by everybody, and just all the critics go, hey, if you want an old school JRPG with new pretty graphics and you don't mind anime tropes, buy. Just and that ends up propelling them to maybe close to Final Fantasy numbers, then that might be one way they save themselves. But I think everything just points to them just dissolving out and either selling the IP, and then whoever ends up buying all the IP just throws the company in the trash and just says, yeah, we'll just keep the IPs, we'll keep them warm, and if we decide to do anything, sure, why not? And it's either that or just another company just buys them out and says, okay, well, now you'll be a sub studio to our main company.
Yeah.
And in both of those two latter scenarios, the only company I see that would honestly step up would just be Square Enix.
Yeah.
Just that's really the only company I can think of. And even then, just it would be very hard for Square Enix to just buy the studio out, because they're going to look at the financial performance and go, you guys have been bleeding money. Just maybe you guys are mismanaging the IP, and maybe that's the problem.
Yeah.
We'd rather just buy out all the IPs and then basically just give you enough money to basically just pay everyone a last paycheck and just say, sorry, company's done. Now we own the IPs. Get lost.
And with Square trying to look lean in order to get bought, I don't think that's going to happen. It might, but it would have to be a very sweetheart deal. It would have to be pretty cheap in order to do that. The only other company that might jump at it would probably Sega, because they've had some work with them. But even then, I don't see Sega jumping at that, since they have Atlus, who does a whole bunch of different RPGs. Unless you want to give the IPs to Atlus to do something with it. But yeah, and that's kind of sad, because I am a fan of Valkyrie Profile, and they've had good games in the past, but as of recently, they've not really gotten any exciting games under their belt. And from what I recall, too, the sales have not been very hot either. So this is really not that big of a surprise. Sad, of course, but yeah, unfortunately, that's just seems like the after this, if they don't sell really well, they're probably done, and that stinks at that end.
Honestly, just the Divine Force, I'm definitely kind of hesitant on, because I do like some of the Star Ocean games.
Yeah.
The first one when it was remastered for PSP, and then later remastered for a Switch, PC, and PS4. That one was good. Second Story, love that one on the original PlayStation. It was remade for PSP, but I think what irritated me the most was Square, on announcing to the West that we were getting First Departure R, conveniently left something out that the Japanese announcement got, which was that Second Story's PSP remaster would also be coming out to Switch and PS4. And I know a lot of sites were annoyed with this. They're just like, what the hell, Square? Why didn't you localize Second Story? Just this would have been great to have on PC, PS4, and Switch. And of course, just Square finally put out like an English PR announcement saying, yeah, we've got really no plans to ever release that in English ever. And that also includes the fact that we're not releasing an Asian copy with an English language option either. So, yeah, don't expect us to ever put out an English version of the PSP game being remastered for Switch and PlayStation anywhere. So, yeah, just stuff it, guys. So that irked a lot of people, and in my opinion, just it was a lost opportunity, because that would have been a great way to sort of hype people on the Star Ocean train and been like, hey, remember that one Star Ocean that everyone loved on PlayStation? Well, it's back on Switch and PS4, and maybe that could have helped kind of drive some attention towards the Divine Force many years later. I don't know, but yeah, just it's a bit sad to see them probably ending up just being completely insolvent just by the time just next year comes around, because yeah, just if they've been just constantly hemorrhaging money, just I don't think the Divine Force has that kind of selling power to just put them magically back on track.
Yeah, I am just a bit surprised it lasted as long as they did, to be completely honest, because again, looking at their last few games, they've not been that hot. They've either been minor critical successes, or they've been panned to a certain extent. And I look at this and I wonder what's been keeping them afloat to a certain extent. And maybe it was the remakes, or maybe it was subcontracting for other games that kept them afloat at this time. But yeah, unfortunately, the business part of this can be pretty cruel. But if you're not making games people want, I mean, this is the result. And Tri-Ace, when they started, were pretty innovative in RPGs with combat and storytelling and stuff like that. But I don't think they ever reached a higher plateau than what they did in the PS1 and PS2 era. So this is not really a surprise to me. It's just more of a surprise they've lasted as long as they did. So
sad to see them probably go by the time next year arrives, but just that's the cruel nature, the business side of video games. And I think I can speak for the both of us. Just when you start looking on how the video game sausage is made, sometimes you see really sad and cruel shit like this, and there's nothing you can do, be it as a consumer, to kind of turn the tide, because if it's a bad game, yeah, there's no way that you're going to be able to just sell a bad game to people, because people are just going to go, why would I play that? That's awful.
Yeah, exactly. And they've unfortunately had some messy games in their past, and I don't think they've ever built themselves back up after that. So they've made better games, but they just never reached the heights that they did in the beginning. And I guess they're on borrowed time, is what I would say. Thank you for listening to this podcast segment. The Capital Games Podcast is done every week, and we post it on all your favorite podcast apps, as well as segments on YouTube. If you want to listen to another segment, you can listen to a new one right there on the screen. We also do a movie podcast called the Capital Games Movie Club. If you'd like, you can go ahead and click on that and see all the movies that we have reviewed from that point. Thank you for listening, and we hope to hear from you soon.